Good afternoon. We now call to order the Tuesday, March 11th, 2025, 3 p.m. School Board Workshop. Please rise for a moment of silence, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance and the National Anthem. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Oh, say that you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose fresh stripes and bright stars through the perilous skies, o'er the meadows we watched, where so gallantly streamed, and the rocket's red glare. Thank you. Please be seated. Okay, so we're going to move on to roll call, and we'll start down at the end of the table.
Ramirez, present.
Janie, Ruddy, present.
Derek Bars.
Will Furry, present.
LaShakia Moore.
Excuse me.
Oh, sorry, I didn't.
Christy, Chong.
We still got time for you to say it. Great, so we'll just move on past our ceremonial items here and move forward to additions and changes to the agenda. Are there any, Superintendent Moore?
Yes. I request that 10.01 be moved after public comment and that 10.03 be pulled. We were just contacted that developer is going in a different direction.
Okay, so we're going to pull 10.03 and move 10.01 to right after public comment.
Yes.
Okay. Very good. I'd like a motion to adopt the agenda as amended.
A motion to approve.
Okay, motion by Mr. Bars. Second by Ms. Chong. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Hearing none, passes unanimously. Okay, so we'll move on to public comment. Do we have anybody signed up for public comment today? We do not? Okay, so we will close public comment and we will move on to item 10.01. This is information only, beach funding plan. We have presenters from the county. Welcome.
How are you? So having not presented at the school board, where do we?
Right here. Please join us right here at the table. Thank you for that. Are these all the same?
No, these are the same.
Oh.
It's just, yeah.
Oh, there's three
Documents, yeah.
items? Okay.
Yeah.
We should have a summary and then more of a comprehensive report, and then I think the other one's probably a copy of the presentation itself. Do we have a clicker, or do you advance it?
We'll
The
have
team
our
will advance it.
advance it.
All right, well, thank you. Well, good afternoon, and thank you for allowing us to come share a little bit about the Flagler County Coastal Erosion and Beach Management Plan. We have been presenting to all of the elected officials in Flagler County, and we didn't want to exclude the school board because we feel that it is a county-wide benefit, and we wanted to show you how that correlation aligns with the school board. So we've worked hard over the past couple of years doing a lot of community outreach. I think we've probably done somewhere between 25, 30 of these presentations. So just appreciate the time to be able to come here and share it with you. So when we talk about being a coastal community and what does that value to Flagler County, I think that there's a lot of benefit that we're seeing community-wide. When you look at some of the unique advantages that Flagler County has as a coastal community, when you talk about economic development, when you talk about tourism, last year alone, Flagler County had seen just under 1 million people in tourism. So when we look at the economic impact of tourism in Flagler, it's about $890 million alone with tourism, which is probably one of our strongest economic engines that we have in Flagler. They employ or support just about 12,000 jobs, which equates to about 23% of the workforce in Flagler County. Aside from the tourism aspect, I think that, it really talks about quality of life and what drew people here into Flagler County. I think being a coastal community that you experience higher property values than you would, say, in maybe Putnam County, where it's an inland county. So I think that there is a lot of value overall to quality of life and what it means to live in Flagler. So just wanted to briefly go over that. And then next slide, we have the kind of just going over a little bit of the brief history. I'm not going to bore you with a lot of the details, but the county had seen some decline in our coastline pre-Matthew, but I think Matthew in 2016 was really the catalyst to get the county really taking a sharp look at, what are we going to do when we look at our coastline. So going back to Hurricane Matthew, which was in October of 2016, Flagler County has been under a declared emergency state over 195 times. So every week we renew that emergency declaration. And so over the last 8 years, it's been 195 times that we've actually had to declare local state of emergency. When we look at how can we exit the emergency situation or the emergency condition that we're in, really the only way to do that is to come up with a beach management plan and come up with funding for that plan. So what we were presenting was our strategy on how do we get there. When you look at our community, aside from the area in Flagler Beach where we did Reach 1, the Army Corps project, that's probably the only area that's not more vulnerable today than it was pre-Matthew. So when you look at our entire 18 miles of coastline, it's still sitting pretty vulnerable. Next slide. We've heard, like I said, we've been doing this now for a couple years. We've heard that just get a seawall will fix everything. Well, seawalls traditionally are probably 3 times the expense of putting a dune and beach management plan together. But even if you had a seawall, that's not the end-all be-all. You still have to put sand in front of it. You can see this picture is in Daytona where the seawall collapsed. Because it is essential that you have nourishment in front of that seawall to help protect that infrastructure and that natural shoreline. What you see is seawalls are typically designed to defend against the storm surge and erosion, but without having that healthy beach in front of it, it will accelerate sand loss and it'll undermine that seawall. So we just have 2 examples there that we show you. And then when we talk about the cost of inaction, certainly doing nothing is an option. I don't know that it's an option that I would recommend because without having a proactive beach management plan, you're really putting the county at risk to severe economic, environmental, and community consequence. And so when we look at what would happen if we did nothing, this is really kind of just a look at what we would probably experience. When we talk about erosion, it will threaten tourism, which is, like I mentioned, one of the key revenue drivers in our community. You would have diminished public access as well as a loss of recreational opportunities. When we look at the property loss in the hammock, and I think it's probably in your backup documents, not necessarily the PowerPoint. So not only would you have a loss in economic development and tourism, but when you look at how much money actually comes from tourists into our community, it's estimated that tourists pay about 30% of our sales tax. So I know that you all levy a half cent to support the school system. Well, think about if you had a 30% reduction because we didn't have tourism here in Flagler County. when we talk about the properties on the barrier island, it is probably some of our larger per capita tax base on the barrier island. So when you think about how our revenues are generated through a millage rate countywide, they do contribute a very high level when you're looking at the per capita that comes into Flagler. So when we were looking at, in the backup, you have maybe a 25% loss in taxable revenue. I know for the county it would be upwards of 8 million. I think the school board were somewhere around 6 million or 6.4 million. What would that do to the school board if now all of a sudden you were faced with not only a loss in sales tax revenue, but also loss with the depreciated value of property on the barrier island? And we were just looking at those properties on the barrier island. You could even attribute storm surge and flood inundation coming over the beaches, where potentially you could have water coming across A1A and impacting any of the low-lying areas anywhere along the intercoastal saltwater canals. So think of Palm Coast, the F section, the C section, Sanctuary, as you make your way down on Colbert, areas of Grand Haven, I think you have Forest Park. You've got a lot of areas that aren't beachside that would be impacted. So I think it's, consider it when we look at what that would do to our community. If you could, next slide. This is just a look at the overall concept of the beach management plan. We've got it separated out into different reaches. In 2021, Flagler County had sponsored the beach management study. It was intended to identify the beach management needs as well as the goals and implementation requirements. The plan was subsequently adopted by our board in October of 23. So as we look at this plan, it's a lot of information, but it's really 4 definitive reaches of the beach, and they're defined not only by the makeup of the beach and the characteristics that are there, but also the funding that's available. So we started with Reach 1, which was really the Army Corps project. And in this particular area of South Flagler Beach, it's about 3.5 miles. And it is an area where we were using offshore dredge material. We used about 1.7 million cubic yards in that area. It was about a $29 million project. It was completed right before Labor Day of last year, and it encompasses the area of 28th Street South all the way up to 6th Street South. So you did have that federal piece with some non-federal tapers. And then as we move forward with the project, the non-federal pieces will be picked up as part of Reach 2, which should be the next one. This area here is going to pick up where the last project left off, which will be somewhere in the area of 6th Street north in Flagler Beach, and it should go all the way up north of Barn Park, about 1,900 feet. This is an area where we're looking at, again, using an offshore sand source. A little bit more in the way of volume and cubic yards, but it is a larger area, so you won't see the beach built back as big as it is in the Army Corps project. It was about 200 feet. As you start going north along the coastline, you start getting into some environmental issues, which is why these reaches are very specific in nature. But this, again, will probably be about 35 million, 5.5 miles. It is an area that in the future will include placement of sand in front of the sea cant walls that were put in by FDOT. And then if we could, the next one, Reach 3, is the permitting and design. This is going to be north of Barn Park. This would be the areas of Hammock Dunes, Ocean Hammock, some of those communities up there. I think you have Sea Colony as part of that as well. But this is an area right now where we have a dune-only project, meaning that we can only go in and build back a dune. We are modifying the permit to include the dune and the beach. We'll also do some environmental studies to really look at the impacts to the hard bottom. Hard bottom is the rocks that you see exposed on the beach as well as in the, into the surf. This is an area, though, that we are looking at having to implement some emergency projects over the next few years, because this is an area that's critically eroded. This is an area that is in need of another Army Corps feasibility study that would take a look at this area of the beach. It's actually the entire coastline, but there's opportunities here where you could end up with the designation of critically eroded, which would open up different funding availability through not only the federal government, but through the state. This is an area, though, that I had mentioned that we are trying to get to a point where maybe we can do a dredge project. It's really going to depend on what the environmental impacts look like when we start looking at the hard bottom, the rocks. So if you look at the cost comparison for a dredge project, it's about $25 a cubic yard, where if you had to do a truck haul, it's 3 times, so it's about $75 a cubic yard. So a big significant difference there in the cost, but we're continuing to work there. We hope to have that area underway in probably 2 to 3 years. And then the next slide is Hurricane Milton. So following any storm, we typically go out, we work with our consultant to do an assessment to determine what those damages look like. So you have your FEMA Cat B, which is your Category B, your emergency protective measures, and then you have your Cat G, which is really building back that facility to pre-storm conditions. Our consultant had engaged in this work back in November of '24. They completed the Cat G work for us. That is being evaluated right now by FEMA. And then they're also right now working on the Category B, which would just be to look at some of those emergency protective measures. So when we looked at it, the estimate on the Cat G was somewhere in the area of about $14 million. There would be a $2 million local share that we would have to come up with. So if we look at the initial construction of all of the beach work that's required, it's 18.1 miles. It's about a $120 million project to build back not just the dune, but also build back that depth on the beach. When we look at the use of our federal and state partners, the piece that remains funding that needs to come from the local level is that $42.4 million. This does not reflect any staff time. This is really just a hard construction cost. So any time that was spent either through administration, county attorney, our GIS drone, purchasing, procurement, that is not captured here. So those in-kind costs are not here. This is just hard costs for construction. So local funding strategy, we've been working at this now for a couple years, where we are taking a look at how can we fill that gap. So through the Board of County Commission, we had identified $5 million. It's currently sitting in our fiscal year '25 budget. We're also actively pursuing grants somewhere in the neighborhood of $15 million, which brings that cost down to about $22.4 million that's going to be needed over the next 2 to 3 years. And so we need to figure out how are we going to fund that. And then naturally, once you build it back, you want to be able to maintain it. So we anticipate that you will have, as a community, will have some ongoing renourishment costs every 6 years is really the interval that we're looking at. In the Army Corps area, they originally had anticipated probably about 10 to 11, but what they're seeing now is a higher acceleration of erosion than sand that naturally comes back out into the ocean and is available in the near shore. So when we look at the maintenance, though, the cost every 6 years, it's about $72 million at the local level, which is that top chart. And then if you break it down, that chart below it is really just showing how much money we need to set aside annually as part of that equivalent annual cost. So roughly we need about $72 million every 6 years. It comes down to needing $12 million locally. Naturally, that's not the cost of the project, but that's the local share that we need to come up with. So next slide. When we talk about public purpose, I know we've heard a lot from the public about whether or not, we're throwing public funds out at the beach. So we want to make sure that we have public access to the beach. It's vital not only for tourism, but for recreation, and I think for community well-being and economic stability. But through our process, we've secured perpetual easements to be able to access the beach, to be able to do some of that emergency work. We also need to safeguard public enjoyment and preserve some property rights. When we look at customary use, it's something that the board had adopted in 2018 to protect the public's enjoyment of the beach. And then we also are working through, like I mentioned before, those emergency declarations, which through that process we reinforce the proactive policies to show that shared resource for current and future generations. So it does meet the test for public purpose. And then next slide, potential funding. So this is where we started looking at, okay, well, how can we fund this? So we have been evaluating several different options. We'll go over each one of them, but you have your tourist development tax, which is what's paid through your bed tax for hotel stays or Airbnbs. You could do a special assessment or a tax, whether it's a municipal service benefit unit or an MSBU, or you could do the taxing unit, which would be an MSTU. We also looked at other sources of general revenue, whether or not the county was to allocate or carve out a dedicated millage. Not that we would raise our millage, but we would carve it out of what we currently collect. And then we also had looked at doing a local option half-cent sales tax, similar to what you levy, a little bit different for us. You could bond it if it went out for referendum. We're not looking at bonding it. And then the supplemental disaster recovery, that's the stuff that you would normally get post-storm from FEMA or state DEM. So these are just some of the ways we could fund it. And then if we could, tourist development tax, as I mentioned, that is used, it comes in from the tourists, from their hotel stays. It's part of state statute 125. The county right now gets 5%. That's the maximum amount that the county can levy. Of the 5%, 1% is already dedicated to the beach. Another 1% goes into capital for capital projects, and then the remaining 3% goes into supporting tourism here at the local level. That's what supports their day-to-day operation. So right now, as it is, we've got 1% dedicated. It's roughly about $900,000 a year. We can't increase beyond the 5%. It's capped by statute. Areas that do collect a little bit more are the areas where you have like convention centers or big, heavy tourism. So we're not there. And then that local option half-cent, similar to what you guys do with your half-cent, the county, as a small county, is entitled to levy up to 1%. So currently we only levy a half ourselves. We are the only small county in the state of Florida who does not levy the full 1%. So we still have a half that sits on the table. When you look at what that would be, for us, not going out to referendum, it would be a supermajority of our board, which would be 4 out of 5 of our commissioners would have to approve this. The half-cent that we currently have out there was done in 2012. It's a 20-year term, so that one would be expiring in the near future. It is used right now for infrastructure and support of public safety. So county-wide, we generate about 10.4. It's probably similar to what you guys receive on your half-cent. When you look at the county's portion of it, the amount that we receive direct, it's only about 4.8. It's been used to expand the jail. It's been used for fire stations, road projects, and things like that. That's really where we've used it for infrastructure support and support for public safety. So then you can also look at the ad valorem, as I mentioned, not raising our millage, but was when you look at the 18.1 miles, you've got a little over, roughly about 2 miles of county-owned parks. So they are publicly owned, so I think that there is a connection here that if we're going to use taxpayer money to support those public assets, I think it's important that we do that. And I do think that it seems to be an appropriate use of those public funds. So next slide, please. So when we were trying to come up with what would our path look like moving forward and how can we close the gap on that money that we needed for the initial construction, this is something that our board has seen, but they have not actually considered it or adopted it yet. So we're waiting for that to happen before we can implement or proceed. We have a follow-up meeting with all of the cities in county tomorrow. They've all seen this presentation. Tomorrow will be an opportunity for them to come together and just kind of talk about it as a community. What can they support? But I can kind of walk you through this. This would lead us through the next 3 years of funding that we need to finish the construction. So this would be the existing half-cent sales tax, not a new one, but this would be the existing one that Flagler County receives. We would carve out a portion of that. We would also look to use TDC funding, which is that Fund 1109 and 1111. The 1109 is the one that's for capital projects. The 1111 is the one that's already dedicated to the county's beaches. I think it's a good use of the construction dollars that sit in the 1109 fund because if we're investing in tourism assets, I think this is probably our largest tourism asset is the beach. And then when we look at the carve out of millage, that 0.14 mils is what would cover the publicly owned parks. And then, as I mentioned, we're still going after grants. We have 2 seawalls for FDOT that exist in Flagler Beach, north and south. Early conversations with John Tyler, I know that they had carved out some money in their budget to be able to place sand in front of those. We do need to protect them. And then that carryover of the $5 million. So with this plan, we would arrive at the amount that we need over the next 3 years to be able to complete the construction of the entire coastline. And then next slide, please. And then when we look at if we're going to invest in the reconstruction of the dune and the beach, then we should have a plan to maintain it. As it exists today, Flagler County is only obligated to maintain the beach where we have jurisdiction, which is really just the unincorporated area. So north of Painters Hill, going up north towards Marineland, that's the area where we have jurisdiction. We don't have jurisdiction in Flagler Beach, Beverly Beach, or Marineland. We're trying to come up with a way that we can come together as a community and protect our biggest asset. So this is a plan that we came up with, similar approach to what we were showing on the beach construction. But this is really looking at moving forward what we would need every 6 years. This would be the implementation of a new half-cent sales tax. And in this plan, what we were describing is that Flagler County, Flagler Beach, Beverly Beach, and Marineland would contribute 100% of the new half-cent sales tax to the beach. What we were asking for is the City of Bunnell and the City of Palm Coast to consider contributing half of their new revenue that they would have. This is something that the Board of County Commission would end up having to bear the brunt of voting for this and moving this forward. What we would need from them, from the cities, would be interlocal agreements that kind of show what that cost share would be. So that's the half-cent piece. When we look forward just for the ongoing maintenance and renourishment, we drop out the Fund 1109 and just focus on the 1111, which is intended to cover that. And then we still would have dedicated millage to protect the public parks. In this scenario, what we were looking at implementing would be an MSBU, or a municipal service benefit unit. It would be $160 imposed on every parcel on the barrier island, showing that the people that live on the barrier island have maybe a little bit more skin in the game, since that's the community in which they live. Some people are a fan of that, some are not. We are continuing to have conversations with those cities to come up with a way that we can, maybe we don't do it as a flat 160, maybe it's a sliding scale based on the value of the property. Continuing to go after grants, continuing to have conversations with DEP about the protection of their parks. You've got Gamble Rogers, and you also have Washington Oaks, and then the seawall protections. But I think when we look at this, this is a way that we could fund it. It's probably one of many ways. And really what we were looking at was input from the communities to, what do they support? Is this something that they could get behind? Is it something that they'd be willing to support? As I mentioned, I think that the beach is probably our biggest asset. So I think it's important that we come up with a plan to protect it. So that would be the way to do that. This is really just looking at the equitable split of sales tax. It kind of shows you big picture what we would be collecting with this new collection of sales tax. I did mention that tourists pay about 30% of this into the community. When we were looking at this, I had mentioned the 100% coming from the county and all of the coastal communities, and then half. So when we look at Bunnell would contribute, they would look to collect about $214,000. They'd get to keep about 107, give back 107 for the beach. Palm Coast, their collection's about $5.4 million. They would keep 2.7 and give back 2.7. And they could use it however they wanted. I know that they've got some infrastructure challenges, so that might be a way to kind of help close that gap. And then I think the next ones are really just our path moving forward with next steps and timeline, things that we need to do. We've been doing community outreach. Tomorrow I mentioned we have our discussion as a joint city-county workshop. And then we're just really looking for level of commitment from the cities in town. And depending on the level of commitment, we'll either go forward as the county in the unincorporated area, which Hopefully that's not what we do. And then this is really just the implementation of things that we would have to do as far as our next steps when it comes to interlocal agreements and arrangements that we would have to do. I think the next slide just has more of those next steps of what we were looking to do. And really, I just wanted to share with you, at the end of the day, I think it is going to impact the school system to some degree, whether it's the decrease in sales tax as it relates to tourism. If you consider that tourists pay in 30%, I think it's a significant amount. I don't know where you can find people willing to pay 30% of anybody's bills, but this is an opportunity where we could do that through the tourism and through that half cent. You know, when we looked at, you know, what is the fairest way to do this, I think this way at least everybody has skin in the game. You know, we've heard it from the coastal communities that the tourists come there. They really don't invest because they don't own property, but they're here to use the beach. And I think when you look at the combination of tourist development tax, which is 100% from tourists, and then sales tax being 30%, even Palm Coast, you know, we've heard it from a lot of people that it is a community-wide asset, and it's something that probably needs to be protected and supported county-wide. There would be, like I said, an impact to the school system if we had a loss in property values, or if we saw less and less tourists coming here. They truly do make up 30%. So we just wanted you to be aware of what we were presenting. We didn't want you to be left out or think that, you know, we didn't care about you and wanted to share this information with you. So again, just appreciate the time and coming and being able to kind of share it with you where we are. I'm sure you hear this in the community, so.
Sure. No, we appreciate you coming down to keep us in the loop here of all that. Very informative presentation, Ms. Petita. Thank you for that. Was there any questions for?
What is
Mr.
the rate of
Salinas, or-
erosion that we're currently experiencing, and has it increased or has it been pretty steady?
I'm not a coastal engineer, so we'd probably need them to be here. What they're seeing is, though, is an increase in what we've experienced over the years. So early on, prior to Matthew, so prior to 2016, it was more gradual erosion, and I think ever since Matthew, what you're seeing is more and more, a much higher accelerated rate, which is why initially the Army Corps had thought that they could do their renourishment every probably 10 to 11 years. They're not thinking that anymore. So they are seeing a more gradual. We'll know more probably after we come back and do our second Army Corps study. We had done one a few years back where they call it a 3x3 study because it takes 3 years and it's $3 million. Well, now they're saying it's like more like a 4x4, so it's $4 million in 4 years. We still have a lot of critically eroded areas in Flagler County. The last time the Army Corps had done the study, there were actually two sections. So you had the South Flagler Beach, and then you had one a little bit further north, which encompassed some of the unincorporated area. But the return on investment wasn't there for them to initiate that second section. What we're hoping is through additional Army Corps studies that we're able to determine more and more areas that qualify for federal and state funding, because they are seeing more erosion in those areas.
I guess, so what you're saying is it's $10 million a mile and then over $600,000 a mile annually after you fix it. And I think, you know, when you look at Flagler, our sales tax rate is 0.5% higher than our two neighbors. And I know tourism obviously plays an important role, but if the school would also be impacted if our local taxes are higher than the other areas, people will not choose to bring families here. So I think probably one thing that people would want to know to make that investment is, well, are these, is the rate or the reasons for the erosion being addressed as opposed to just fixing the symptom of some other items that might be happening? And I think that that would go a long way in helping to have conversations to make that position.
Yeah, no, we appreciate that. And I think what they're seeing, and you can kind of witness it in South Flagler Beach, where you have the Army Corps project, where you have a natural, so once you put the sand on the beach, you have a natural profile that will develop. And so it's part of like that equilibration where sand, it levels out, and what you're seeing is some of the newly placed sand is now building back that seabed, right, that bottom. what you're seeing the rest of the coast, there is no material to put back. And so it's been year after year after year of erosion, so you don't have anything in the near shore. So you don't have anything to kind of absorb those waves. So when you look at South Flagler Beach, where that Army Corps project was following the storm, you can go back and you can actually see where sandbars have now created, where you can see waves breaking. So the sand isn't really like lost, but it's there. But what's happened is the entire coast has never been renourished. So like when you go to areas like, I came from Broward, so in South Florida, they've been doing this probably since the 60s, so they don't have that same problem. We've never had a engineered beach, and that's why you're seeing this problem, and if you don't do something, it's only gonna get worse. And so even though you're putting sand on the beach, it's kind of expected that over probably the first 3 intervals of renourishing it, that you're bringing back enough material that you're not going to experience that same rapid loss of sand, you know. So it's just that it's never been maintained, and so it just, you know, it is what it is, unfortunately.
Yeah. Yeah.
We've been collecting data in terms of how the beach profile is changing through the entire 18 miles, and we're able now to model before and after on those. The other piece I was going to mention in terms of the sales tax, we're going to be actually creating some scenarios of how the community will.
I would imagine that yours is the same as ours. So as a small county tax, it's capped at 5,000. So like say you bought a car for 40,000, you're only paying tax on 5. You're not paying the additional half cent on the full 40. It is capped at 5,000. I would imagine that yours is probably the same.
Yeah, I guess it would just be, it would be interesting if there was a model, for example, like the public access beach areas where you say, okay, this section represents this portion. And I understand the property values, but I think a lot of people are like, well, I can't even ever possibly afford a house on the beach. And already my property insurance is higher because I'm balancing out the cost of insurance agencies covering coastal properties. And so I think that there's sometimes this idea that they're sharing a burden that they don't, did not contribute to. So if it were more of, okay, a little bit more, like you said, in the one area, this percentage is higher because they should have skin in the game on those homes, but I don't know if that's enough before enacting a sales tax in this county where our median income is not as high as maybe some of those other coastal counties.
Yeah, no, I think that your comments are well received. I think, you know, when we were looking at this, we're trying to come up with a way of how do you solve a problem that's existed for more than 25 years? And as local government, we really don't have a lot of solutions.
Right.
I mean, naturally, not that I would suggest this one either, but I mean, you could increase the millage, but I wouldn't suggest that either because we're already at well over 8.
Right.
On that already.
And
Yeah.
so we're looking for ways to reduce the millage, and for the last, I think, 6 years, maybe we've reduced the millage every year, even if it's just a tenth, just to kind of, you know, start bringing it back. The good thing, I guess, about this is that sales tax is discretionary, so people with more money will tend to spend more. It's not linked to properties, you know, where that is the only recourse we have is to change the millage to get what we want.
On necessities, like medication.
And I think in this case, you know, it doesn't apply to food, it doesn't apply to medications. It's really maybe the nice to have luxury items that are being impacted. And at the end of the day, I think, you know, when you look at tourism and how much they contribute to our you know, sales tax, it seems to be maybe a more equitable way to pay for it than putting it on the back of the people that live here. I don't know,
Yeah.
like I said, this is probably one of millions of ways of how we could fund it. You know, we were looking for input, and I really appreciate the input, you know, that we can go back and kind of, you know, work with our board on trying to figure out a way. Not everybody's a fan of paying the 160 as an MSBU, and so we're trying to come up with a way of, you know, because we do have, not everybody who lives on the barrier island is wealthy and, you know, has a lot of discretional income. There's a lot of people that are on Social Security fixed incomes that, maybe they're generational and have lived there for years, and we don't want to create a situation where now they can't even afford to live
They're
where
forced
they've
out.
lived their whole lives. So trying to balance a way that, do we need to come up with some sort of a grant program where people can qualify if they, fit certain parameters, or do we need to have it be a sliding scale, or maybe it's not $160 per. If it's under, I think he was just working on some numbers literally right before we walked over here, where maybe if the value of the
It's under
property is under 200,000,
Charge them half of
maybe
that.
it's, $50, $60, or, and then you have
Right.
like different, sections that maybe end up paying a little bit more. But
Yeah.
just trying to make it equitable and fair is really
Right.
the thing. There is a value, I think, community-wide to having a beach.
Yeah.
If not, I think any property, whether it's in Bunnell, Palm Coast, I think that what you would experience is a higher resale value on your property than, say, Putnam County or, Palatka,
Yeah.
So I think that there is a value there that needs to be protected.
Yeah, the other point, Heidi, is that the income that we receive from the tourist tax and the sales tax that they generate, the sales tax they generate offsets about $400 per property
Right.
on taxes. So if we lose that economic engine, we'll have to make it up somehow or reduce services.
Right.
It's more of a fair tax
Right,
rather
yes.
than increasing.
Yeah, more on consumption and, not on the backs of property owners. And, and what we have a very unique and special geographic layout here in Flagler County. Living in South Florida for many years, to have a whole community that is within this close proximity to the beach, the property values, even on the other side of 95, that close proximity to the beach would be so much higher in other areas. Yet although some may say that housing is expensive, and that is another issue for another day, but if you look at it comparatively, to live this close to the beach, the real estate values here are pretty reasonable, and people pay for that privilege to live so close, right? I mean, literally, you can be in the beach within 15 minutes almost everywhere in, maybe Bunnell a little longer, but that's rare, to have that kind of lifestyle here. So it is a special asset that we need to protect as a community, in my view. And I always, I do prefer more of the consumption tax model versus, putting that burden on, and the city has made it clear that they're constantly dealing with that because we don't have enough commercial to offset that, right? So,
Yeah.
And also, in this particular place, now where can you go when you have just open access to the beach like we have? It doesn't have it in a lot of places on the shoreline like we do. A lot of people come to the beach and they don't spend any money at Flagler Beach. I mean, there's studies that show that. They come over from wherever they come from, they go to the beach and they leave. They don't spend in those tax dollars over at Flagler Beach or wherever, Beverly or whomever. But, there's a lot to be said making sure that we're maintaining it, because lots of people besides residents of Flagler Beach are utilizing our assets in large numbers. I mean, you can pick a study anytime you want to, but I know of one particular of the large percentage of the population that go to the beach are not Flagler Beach residents. They're from all over the county that go to Flagler Beach. So, I hope that's recognized, and we have a gym, and hopefully it'll be protected all across the entire miles that we have.
With the sales tax model, the majority of the folks that contribute to the sales tax are residents of Palm Coast, because this is the larger majority of the people. So you take about 80 or 90% of those dollars that are coming from the city of Palm Coast, plus if we implement, the board approved this new sales tax, half of that, so they're contributing a large amount of dollars into this project.
yeah. And we're one of the few beachfront communities that don't have meters up and down A1A to pay for parking, and that's another beautiful thing. So.
Yeah, I think that, to your point, the only way that we're going to fix the inequity in tax base of not relying so much on residential and having that commercial industrial growth, think about the people. Right now we're meeting with 5 different companies, prospects that are looking to come here. being a coastal community is a huge draw to them. And so think about when we're trying to attract those businesses here and they're bringing workforce with families, with students and children that need to go to school. If we don't have money to protect the beach and we have a decline in the level of service in our school system, who are we going to end up attracting here? So it's more than just fixing the beach because it's the beach. It's all of these things compounded together.
Absolutely.
Where, you know, it does define our quality of life, it does set us on the map, and, you know, this is the feedback that we're getting from these companies that we're trying to bring here. And I know that, you know, maybe largely, maybe it's not a large percentage of people, they don't want growth. I think that you need to have growth, because if you don't have growth as a community, then you're dying as a community. But I think it just needs to be smart in what you're attracting. And I think, you know, a huge component of it is making sure that we have property that's designated for commercial and industrial, because when you think about how much they pay, they're not capped. You know, we as a community are capped with homestead at 3%. Well, a lot of people in the community don't even pay because we have so many different homestead exemptions that are available to them that that cap of 3% isn't keeping up with the cost of inflation and what we're seeing. So if you don't start bringing in that commercial element, then you're not going to be able to afford to live here, and you're not going to have jobs for the younger folks to come back to once they go to college. They're not going to have something to return to. So it's like this cyclical thing that you need to get ahead of it and just kind of, you know, I don't know, it's all intertwined, and that's why I say it's a county-wide community benefit. It's not just a beach problem.
Yeah, and I would just say that I think one of the most important thing in the message is to make it clear what those exemptions are, because really that's what's the voters going to say, how is this going to affect me? And if they understand it's more geared toward tourism, luxury items, and a lot of my everyday stuff is not going to be affected by this, you might get more buy-in, you know?
Yeah, we'll be working on that.
Yeah, no, we appreciate that. And I think that the school board did a great job when they redid theirs a year or two ago. So we'll probably look to LaShakia and her team for some guidance with that, so.
Very good. Well, Ms. Petito, Mr. Salinas, thank you very much.
Thank you,
for
guys.
that.
Thank you all very much.
Appreciate it. Thank you, guys.
Appreciate it.
Okay, so we will now move on with our agenda. And we're going to start in financial consent. Welcome.
Good afternoon, Board Chair, Superintendent Moore, and board members. Before we go over 7.01 through 7.07, I just wanted to introduce our new purchasing coordinator, Christopher Kirksey.
Hi.
Hi.
And I
How
just
are you?
wanted to give him the opportunity to just say a few sentences about himself.
Yeah, I started the new position about a month and a half ago, something like that. Learning the ins and outs, learning quickly, so that's good. I come from a history of construction, about 20 years in construction, purchasing. Obviously different than this type of purchasing, but different but the same. Looking forward to the future.
Welcome to the team,
Wonderful.
Christopher.
Thanks for coming on board.
Absolutely.
Okay.
You're welcome.
All right, so we will move on to 7.01 and request board approval of Imagine Charter School financials. Are there any questions on the charter school finances?
And there were some negatives on here, I think we talked about yesterday. Those are all fixed, right? Or some of the things we talked about from that capital outlay?
Sure. When I spoke to their regional finance person after I got these, both of them are corrections from recording error. So one was recorded into the current year revenue when it should have been applied against the receivable because it was from last year. And the second one was them shifting it to the correct account once they did their mid-year cleanup.
So I see that, and I asked you this question earlier where it said 101% of projected, and you said that their actual was actually exceeding their projected, but on this report, the actual says 891, and their projected is 900.
This is the report that he got to me in order to get it on board docs. I will get a corrected one that he's still working on.
Oh, okay, so your answer was it is now over, it just wasn't reflected here.
Correct.
I'm sorry, thank you.
They have exceeded their FTE forecast from last year by
Okay.
probably about 10, maybe.
Okay.
Okay.
Man.
Are there any other questions on Imagine? Okay, hearing none, we'll move on to 7.02. Board approval of purchase orders over 10,000.
I just wanted to hear more of an explanation on the compensation study.
Sure, I will defer that to Superintendent Moore.
Yes, so we have identified that over the years, we have provided different compensation to all of our different areas except in the professional area. That professional area, specifically our administrators, those individuals have only received an increase of whatever the step that is allowed. They have not had any type of increase even when we were increasing different categories. So this is a study to identify where we are related to some identified districts around us.
I have a concern where, number one, we know we have a fixed amount that we can provide towards raises. And so if this study comes back where it's recommending over, we know what we can afford. In addition, I guess, do we see that this service is worth almost the equivalent of 1 year's teacher salary to be able to go on public documents and say, well, here's the average of St. John's or Volusia or whatever. I just think that, as we're heading into more and more of charter schools getting higher enrollment, students taking advantage of the homeschooling options, we have to be really careful about spending money on these things where we have a wonderful set of talented folks who could be able to provide some of this information. I just,
The information,
I hope it's going to come back that it would save us that equivalent amount of money.
I believe that this is a good use of our resources in order to identify where we are. When we often talk about different categories, but our professional individuals are also a category of individuals that we need to ensure that we're remaining competitive with as well. And so, yes, we can pull some information together, and that's been done, but to be able to do a comprehensive study with some suggestions about how we can get to a place of getting those individuals, if it is appropriate, getting those individuals to where they need to be related to their salary, that information will be provided to us.
So this is, are you saying, when you're saying they're administrative, this is school-based administrative or district-based administrative? Again, I just don't see why we would expend this kind of money on a study when really it should never increase what teachers are getting, right? If we're giving teachers whatever percentage, then we go back, how many years did they not receive it? Okay, then that would be the maximum. And we can pull those data pieces. I mean, I'm looking forward to hearing how this is going to provide that direction, but I would have preferred to retain that money and use it for that compensation increase.
My question was with that compensation study as well, how often do we use this type of compensation study or this specific vendor?
This type of study has not been done in the recent 15 years or so. So this type of study has not been done, or I could not find any record of this type of study being done here.
So has there been a cursory review, internally before we've gone out to say we're going to do this? And so have we seen that? I have not seen that report. Do we have that report available internally for us to review that?
We definitely have some information that we can show and provide to the board to signify that there is definitely a need to look at this category of individuals.
I think that may be somewhat helpful just to take a look at for us to kind of understand where we are compared to what review that we've done and how long has it been since that particular report has been done. How long ago has that been? Do we know? That internally that we did.
Oh, internally, and we have looked at this all of this year. This was also something that came up last year, as well as a conversation that was had with the previous superintendent as well, of a need to look at this category of individuals.
I would like to take a look at that if we have that available for my purpose, so I would work with you offline on that.
It-
but-
Agreed.
but-
Is it used for, because I was researching this previous, and it looks like Seminole County Schools uses it. Are there any other counties, and how many people are categories or are using it, like are under it? So it's used for like leadership and, you know, like getting studies, but how many?
You develop a scope of work for it. So we developed the scope of work, what we wanted them to look at. This company has been used by other counties in order to do a similar study. But again, they identified the scope of work that they wanted to review, and then we did the same thing for what we needed.
Okay. So I guess we could just provide some information on what the scope was and the report for all the
Yes,
board members?
please.
And I would like, what is the, how would the information provided by this study change whatever direction or allotment that we have when we're under the contract negotiation? Right?
These are people who are not under, these are not union eligible people.
But the contract negotiations that we've been discussing have also included the administrative salaries.
These individuals where we're looking at, these are not union eligible individuals. So these are individuals that they do not have a collective bargaining agreement or a unit that
Right,
has
those
been
are
bargaining for them.
principals, assistant principals,
Absolutely.
right? So you said all, right? So that's assistant principals, principals, and those salary pieces were also in discussions, right? I know that it's not under the union bargaining, but we had some
When-
conversations.
No, those individuals, they will receive, you know, a step, if a step is applied across the organization, they may receive performance pay if they are on that lane of a contract. But these are individuals that, for instance, when we began to look at increases to the like $15 hour, that we didn't apply that across, we just addressed that with that group. When we made changes to instructional salary, we applied it to that group, that category of individuals. This is looking at a different category of individuals that we have not reviewed. We may get the information that we are in alignment, but I do think that there are going to be pieces that are going to be brought out that that we are going to at least then have some areas that we know that we need to target as we begin to ensure that we're remaining competitive for that group as well.
Okay. Any other on 7.02? Hearing none, we'll move on to 7.03, approval for vendor payments. Okay. we have-
I think 1 minute, we just need
Just
time to
one
pull up
second.
our reports.
Pardon me?
Just give me just one second.
Okay, sure, yeah.
I'm sorry.
No, no worries.
I was
So-
just verifying something I had.
Yeah, so we're on vendor payments?
Yeah.
Okay, yes.
I think one of the items, just to follow up from the last meeting, right, there's some additional radio station ads on these vendor payments. The last time we had that discussion, I wanted to know what was the goal that we are trying to accomplish with paying for that advertising? Have we evaluated that we're meeting our target audience, that money has been moving the needle in the sentiment of receiving more communication? So I would like to see if we're going to continue those payments. I would like to see some insight that it's meeting the goals that we set out to do.
And we can absolutely do that for our next budgeting cycle. This is something that that we have already said we're committed to doing.
So this is a contract, a longer-term contract?
No, I wouldn't say a contract, but these are the sessions that we have agreed to do this budgeting cycle. This is what we budgeted for this year.
So.
And this group, for this specifically, it's also looking at, I mean, we have many ways to, our website and social media and Skylert and all of those ways, but we still have stakeholders that may not be connected in that way. And so we are constantly pushing out information through our radio station to those stakeholders as well.
Yeah, I'm not questioning that it isn't nice, that they don't do a great job, it's not a great radio, that it's not a great service, but, you know, when we're facing times of dropping enrollment, I'm trying to be proactive in looking at this money so that we're not saying, next year, we shouldn't have spent that, right? You know, as a former teacher with a husband as a teacher, right? I've had to buy my kids' clothes at Family Dollar. I've had to buy my kids' clothes at
So, Ms. Ruddy,
the thrift store. So what I'm saying is I'm taking that same approach right now of making sure we're gonna be on budget. And so I would like to know.
You've made this point clear at the last meeting and this one here. I think
Well,
we
what
get the
it's not
point.
being made clear to me is that I would like to see what is the,
Okay, so-
are we on target with the goals of this? And I'm hearing on one aspect that there's a contract and it can't be changed right now, but yet, no, it's not a contract, it's an agreement and a
At the end of the year,
budget.
when we survey our families and our community, and they complete their surveys, they will inform us of ways that they receive the communication and ways that they would like to receive communication. And we use that information in order to identify the ways we will communicate with our stakeholders. And just a reminder that our stakeholders include individuals who do not have children within Flagler schools as well.
I understand that, but our website does not preclude people from
I mean,
only
Ms.
having
Ruddy, look,
children.
okay, so let's first put this in perspective here. We're talking about $226.
The last
at-
one, it was thousands of dollars, so
Well,
if this is being
when you add
recurring,
them all
and that's, I'm gonna add it
Here's my
up.
point, is that we have a chief executive that we've put in charge of managing, but we've given her threshold to spend. It is absolutely our duty to have oversight and accountability on what we're spending. But when we have a budget, a general fund of over $165 million, to spend this much time on $226, I don't think is a good
At this
time.
moment, it's 226. At the last one, it wasn't, and I wonder
Well,
if the
if you add
aggregate
them
is.
all up.
So what I'm saying is that I know, and you have made your point clear, that your position and the way that you want to run your seat is that you are going to put your trust in Ms. Moore and her staff or anybody who sits in those roles. But for me, and how I'm going to serve my term, is to be accountable to the people, to be the voice so that they can see how their money is being spent, so that they can tell me and us, do they agree, do they not agree with this? A school board member doesn't just rubber stamp approve these items. We investigate, we ask, we
we've
recommend
given the superintendent a
policy
threshold of
and strategy.
$50,000
So if you would
as
like
a
to
board, Ms. Ruddy?
continuously at every meeting, interrupt and tell me what
Well, Ms. Ruddy,
to just
if your
put
point
my
is to be
trust
made
in
that
her,
you don't
it's
like
gonna be a
radio ads, I think
long-
we've got
I'm
that.
not
All
saying
right.
I don't
We're gonna-
like
we're
radio
gonna-
ads.
Okay, I'm gonna call it back in order, okay? So every board member has the right to bring anything forward, but you've already made that point pretty clear at a previous board meeting. You've made it clear here, so we're gonna move on from this matter. So is there any other questions regarding these items on vendor payments?
I just had one on FDLE. Was that for, is that for fingerprinting and so
Do you
forth?
have a check number?
328828, there's like 5 of them.
Those are for fingerprinting
Is that
and background
fingerprinting?
screenings.
Okay, just want to make sure I thought. Thank you.
And can you remind me, so with our Advent Health, when will that be ending? Because I know we're going to have a marathon coming up. When is the Advent Health primary fee, the primary care that we're paying, end? Is it going to be right when marathon opens?
For our current clinic?
Yeah, for
We
like
are
the 22,000.
We are on month-to-month with Advent at this point.
And then, okay, so then at the end of that, it will.
Once we get the
stop.
wellness center open, we will go off month-to-month with Advent.
Thank you.
Okay, are we done with vendor payments? So we'll move on to 7.04, approval for deletion of inventory.
Just a point on some of those ones that we've had for the vendor payments, well, not vendor payments, but for, can we get a list of when they were actually auctioned off like the previous one, just so that we know how much actually come back? And I can pull that off.
That would come from, is that transportation?
Is transportation doing that?
Yes, sir.
Just kind of figure out, and we don't, I know you're on this one right now, they're just going out, but like some of the previous ones, are we getting,
We
a good bang for the buck, if you will?
we use Gideon mainly for our buses, and then we also use USA Auctions. And this is showing, getting approval from the board so that we
Right.
can put it on there.
Okay.
If you would like us to shoot you an email on what the prices are that we get, we could easily do that.
Yeah, I'm just kind of curious just to see where we are on some of those. And,
Which one are you?
not those, just some of the previous ones, maybe the last one that we had. We had a laundry list of the last one, or last month.
Of the vehicles that
Yes.
we listed?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I can get that and send it to all the board members.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that.
Okay. So any questions on deletion of inventory? Okay, hearing none, we'll move on to 7.05, finance budget and amendments. Okay.
Can you just give me a quick overview of the transfers, if you don't mind? Or they just,
The budget transfers is when you take the existing budget and move it to a different code strip. So typically when these budgets are done, the easiest way to explain it is like if someone's budgeting $5,000 for supplies, there's two different types of supplies. So when they go to order it, they might have to get it on the correct code strip.
okay, so they just,
So all of the transfers is existing budget that was already budgeted for, and it's just getting moved to a different line
okay, gotcha.
or different project code. Budget revisions is new budget or budget that's being put back into fund balance.
I got that. I want to clear that for me. I appreciate it.
Sure.
All right. If there aren't any other comments or questions, we'll move on to 7.06, approval of professional development travel. Okay, hearing no questions, we'll move on to 7.07, approval of district financial statement.
Thank you, Ms. Warmack, for answering some of the questions I had previously, especially about the school service fund for lunches going, or meals, going negative right now. That's expected and will come back out, just a seasonality thing. And so I think one of the items, and if you could help me if I'm just missing it, was that in previous request, we had said to kind of like line item the number that we're spending to reimburse the Families Empowerment Fund, the scholarship. Is that out of this report, or was that a different report that we had discussed to have that broken out?
That's a separate document. It was not added because we did not get our third calc yet at the time that this was put up.
Okay.
So now that we have our third calc, because it doesn't change until we get our third calc. So now that we have our third calc, A budget revision will be done to pull the scholarship revenue out, pull the scholarship expenses out, and
Okay.
adjust our budget for our new enrollment numbers.
Thank you. I'm sorry, I thought this was prepared when the third calc had gone out. Thank you for that clarity. That's all I had.
Okay. Any other questions? No? Okay. So we will move on to technology. Thank you very much.
Thank you, ladies.
both of you. 8.01, school board policy. Mr. Deasing and Ms. Phillips, welcome.
Good afternoon, Board. We have a couple items that we're bringing to you. I asked Teresa Phillips to come with me for this presentation. She's done a lot of the work from the technology perspective with the Neola project. So I'm going to let her kind of talk a little bit about this, but this essentially are two Neola aligned policies that we're asking the board to advertise in an earlier time frame to allow us to meet the timeline that we need to make sure that all of our processes as we roll into collections and distributions are aligned and in place with where we see things with Neola in July.
As part of our annual registration process starts in May as students start re-enrolling for new devices, whether they're summer projects, and that's directly references to the policies of the acceptable use policy. The current policy now is 321, and it combines students and staff in the same policy, and it was kind of an outdated policy. The new policies with Neola separates it, so it's a student policy is separate from the staff policy. So what we've done is taken the Neola policy for student technology, which combines internet safety and acceptable use, and asking to advertise to replace for 321. And then we took our previous policy, which just focused on internet safety for both staff and students, which was 329, and made that one be the staff technology, internet safety, and acceptable use policy. So we'll leave they're the same Neola policies, the same titles. We're just going to number them to the current numbering that we have now, and that'll be referenced in the annual registration. And then when we transfer over further to more Neola policies and renumber, the same policies will stay, just be renumbered then. The only item that I was just wondering or suggesting, in third paragraph, users are required to refrain from actions that are illegal. I'm wondering if we just take a little more aggressive. Was this on 321 or 329? I'm sorry, 321, the clean version, third paragraph.
I think the required piece is what makes that, you don't do it.
Well, refrain is like, try not to do it, but it's illegal, right?
Well,
So if you
it's
could,
almost like a shall not.
yeah, required to refrain. I think the other item is that I saw some information clearly, right, if we're going to use technology as some curriculum support sometimes for curriculum, information can change much more quickly than when the printed material is created. And we know we have this open option in order for parents, community members to come in and review that curriculum. And so I've seen language in here that, hey, there's no way we could possibly, have you preview necessarily absolutely everything. Do we currently have a process, policy, or whatever it is to advertise the technology apps or software that has been approved? That's not, we know that educators can still have freedom to use some materials off of the internet and other resources, but in those pieces that wouldn't normally come printable, is that something that they do have the option to take a look at, or at least know those are the tools that your children are going to be exposed to? There is, it's posted on the ones that we have the student data privacy agreements with are on there with links to the policies and changes as that comes through. And when you say on there, where's there? On the website. Okay.
They're posted
the technology
on the website, and there's documents for internal use and for parent access, so it shows all of the approved.
Wonderful.
And then it also correlates depending on which grade levels or school level that they're appropriate for. And then it includes links to the SDPAs that we have in place, as well as the ULAs that are posted from the individual software companies.
Yeah, all right, that's awesome. You guys are rocking
And I
it.
think it's under, as part of the curriculum and instructions, like where it's linked to all the resources and things, just additional tools there. And there's other policies in the Neola booklet that reference those specifically, the educational resources. These were just kind of the top two that we have referenced coming up that we felt important to have out and available for students, parents to see when they're signing their annual registration, that these are the acceptable use
Okay.
policies is the main reason we were
Right.
focused on these
Yeah.
two.
And the concern was having these aligned with, as we update our responsible use.
Oh, 100%. The other ones that I was looking at, they were, yeah, completely not up to what today's technology is, yeah.
And I'm on the proposed revision, and I remember like with my orientation, I mentioned this and asked, when students, they have access to tablets, kindergarten, first grade, and the internet, of course, and I see it says now the district shall provide an internet safety program in accordance with State Board of Education. So does that mean that students now will have, like, prior to going on the internet, like a little checklist, like a little, like a test, like to educate them, like what's right, what's wrong? Because that's what I was wondering, because I know we don't do that right now. Kids don't do that.
Well, it's covered as part of like the digital safety in the classroom as part of the instruction in there.
Okay.
Is there, which, where you, is what, 321?
Yeah, it's,
I believe it's in both.
oh, there's not numbered.
Is it 321 or 321?
It's right in the beginning, so it was student technology, internet safety, and acceptable use. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8.
But that's also part of our, like, the internet safety program we have as far as like the web filtering, what's available to students at different ages. Like, there's a different,
Yeah.
things are available to a kindergarten student, say, or
But do
different
they
things
get
are
like a
available
little
to a high school.
training?
that-
So like, does each student get a training, like what's okay to do and what's not okay? Is that what this is saying, that they're going to now be having an internet safety program?
This is, or is this more of our internet safety plan it's referring to?
Well, I think it's both. And it also aligns with, what's the software that?
So we have the common sense media is what we use as
Yes,
far as the
thank you.
plan, so the
Okay.
digital safety we go over with the students. But then we also have a part of the plan where we, as far as control the filter of what's available to them. So like what are we doing from our side and
Okay.
teacher side to make sure they're only using things appropriate, even going into the, do we have the student data privacy agreements? Are they acceptable? So it's kind of a program that involves all three pieces, not necessarily just the student's information or the student
Okay.
education.
Like, I guess
program.
like training, they will now be getting a training for
They
their
always-
tablets?
They
Yeah,
do now,
it's
yeah.
from
They do now.
They do now.
K through
Okay.
8.
And teachers get part, and then we have, as far as our processes in place as well.
Okay, yeah. No, because I saw that, how that's now updated, so I like that.
Yeah.
So it's more clear. Thank you.
Okay,
That was the only thing I needed.
all right, so we'll move on to 8.02. International Society of Technology.
So we're bringing this to the board for approval for travel to attend ISTE, which is in San Antonio this coming year. This is one of the largest instructional technology conferences that is in the country. Probably one of the best that's available. We were attending last year. There's a lot of focus on the implementation and utilization of AI and the impacts in instruction. So we felt that this was something that we feel would be a strong opportunity for our folks to attend from the standpoint of not just the content that's there, but also the opportunity to connect and interact with other attendees that come from around not just the country, but the world.
When you say your folks, the technology department, or are you?
No, just district. So
Okay.
we've had some folks that are identified. We're bringing in a little bit earlier than what we would have in the past, just because of timing. But right now, we're looking at myself, Teresa Phillips, Amy Kopak attending, potentially superintendent, potentially assistant superintendent. We're working through those dates to make sure that they are available.
And are you looking to bring back information regarding the strategy you guys are doing at the district level? Or is it, if you're talking about AI in education, are you going to then provide and disseminate some of those takeaways to the educators? And if so, what format would that
Yes,
take
and
place
I
in?
think that's the
This
intent
is-
always
right.
when we
This is
go
where I
to those
get
conferences.
A lot of the content and information and contacts that I bring back, or
Mhm.
Amy brings back, and or if we go out to do the trainings and information or newsletters, comes kind of from that conference, and then contacts and things made from that.
Would you all be able to bring that back to us to let us know what you've
Oh, absolutely. We
learned?
typically
I mean,
will
you
have
come
a
back and
debrief
they'll
with
have
the team that
information on
goes to do highlights. We do this with FETC conference, which is in Florida as well, to kind of take a highlight reel from those and what our action plans and implementation following it.
And then to this, there will be the addition, when it comes through, it'll be separated, but there are some schools that are looking to bring individuals. I know we've gotten one through Perkins Grant, currently Flagler Coast High School that intends to send at least one individual to this as well.
So we're sending 6 here, attendees 6. With the scope of the amount of classes that are there, and I'm sure some of them run concurrently.
Oh, wow.
Right, so what I'm getting at is that, I did notice that there's a virtual option here also. Do you get anything, aside from the personal interaction, do you lack any additional information through the virtual attendance versus the physical?
So not all the sessions aren't available on the virtual, like, so on, say, Monday, for instance, if you go, there's like 34 sessions available virtually and over 300 if you're there. And a lot of the ones that are there are hands-on experiences that you do with the different products or the people that you meet. And like last year when we went, we would all kind of sit down before and be like, okay, I'm gonna do this session and she's gonna go do this session, we'll compare. This one's available for us, we get like 200 recorded when we come back that we can see too. So
And
like
then-
if one was recorded, we might do that one at a later date, just to kind of get the most
And as
out of all the
attendees,
sessions.
you get access to all of those that were done virtual, they're recorded as well. So there was some conversation about additional licensing to be able to do some of those. But as a district, we are a member of ISTE, so we do get some of those pieces as part of that membership, as well as discount proportion to the conference itself.
Okay, and is there sort of I'm sure that covers a large spectrum of topics. Is there anything that we're specifically going to this conference to bring back, or is it kind of just to try and take it all in?
It's a lot of different things. A lot of it is the policy and the new things that are coming up quickly as AI is changing in education, but also in that how are the different districts handling that, and then just the changes coming about, and as well as like how are they doing the professional learning tied around this. There's a lot of different tracks that are out there.
I was wondering, so I know it says 6, and you mentioned, you're coming up. Is there a way to better like explore sending us not 6? Like, I'm just thinking like usually conferences, they do have them multiple times, and I know it's always fun to have a group, but I'm just wondering if maybe, I don't know, has that been considered, or is this like the normal?
I think,
or
like in our
we're not, like, a
conversation, 6 is
for-profit-
pretty tight, to be honest with you. Like this conference is very large. There's close to 500,000 educators that come together.
I think it was
300 and.
There's 16,000 people that attend this conference annually,
Oh,
is where they
okay.
come out, that are there physically on site. There's more that attend remotely, but it's the biggest conference, and every time I've gone, I literally like leave with my brain hurting. There's just so much information and things that are out there. It by far is one of my favorite, or I think most beneficial conferences that I go to, just because of the content that's there, and it's kind of the best of the best that are out there presenting. They really do a great job as far as vetting.
So are your
Centers.
resources kind of spread out, so, if there's one, you're at one, whoever else is there, so you guys are all grasping different information and coming back together?
Yes.
And so with 6, you feel that's the necessary number to be able to accomplish that? You couldn't accomplish that with less than 6 to, as far as concurrency of the class schedules and presentation schedules?
Well, I think every time that we go to conferences and we bring a team, there's an effort made to make sure that we're not all attending the same things. Because what you find a lot of times is those topics are close to what the work that's being done. So we do make a definite effort to spread out where we're going and what we're attending. Like I said, it's a very, very large conference. But I would say, if it's the purview of the board that we have less than 6 folks go, then we will work through and do the best that we can with that.
Well, my take is, if we're gonna do this, I wanna get the maximum result out of it, right? So I don't wanna try and, if we're just doing it, if we're gonna do it to save money, maybe we just don't go at all, right? We wanna come back with all the benefits of the learning there. So I'm just looking at the efficiency of it. I'm saying, look, this is gonna cost us about $17,000. So I want to see something great come out of this, all this knowledge that we're going to amass there, and how we're going to apply it back here. And if you feel that 6 people is the right number, what I'm just saying is that if it's not, then let's scale it back, right?
So because I know professional learning and development, that happens for faculty and staff in June?
It's
Or-
throughout the whole year, so it's
So you would schedule.
in June or July, it's even out through the newsletters or webinars weekly, or like we go out to the schools to do different things, so it's not just one point in time, we kind of spread it out throughout the year.
If you're talking about, that's dictated by the calendar as well as limitations on the union contract in terms of how much time that they can utilize of a teacher's planning on professional development or other meetings. And there, I believe, what is on next year's calendar? Is it 3 days for professional development?
Upfront, I know it's at least two days. I'm not sure if it's.
I would
3
just,
days.
I love technology. I think that's where we're headed. I'm just trying to think, if we have 6 people, I would feel better knowing, like, what's the plan? Like, okay, we're going, like, is the conference panel out already? Do they already have the topics? Do they have the keynote
lot of them
speaker?
are
Like,
there.
who's going who, or who's going where? And it's only because it's a lot of money, and I know we're really trying to work on the budget.
Right.
So if there's a really good plan and it makes sense, then yes. And then you go, this person goes, and then when are we presenting it to faculty and staff? Are they going to have a webinar where they can log in and they can learn about this tool on this day and that tool on this day? But I think having a plan of how all the information you're going to learn, where is it going to go? So, because normally, like with conferences, a lot of times, like a team this large, I don't see usually go. So I'm just trying to, I want to make sure if we do send 6 people.
4 individuals went last year, and it definitely was tight, trying to get to the different, to get the coverage. Some of it we could go back and watch and did that. But to your point, all of that will be done. Now, is it done at this point? No, because the 6 people haven't been finalized who are going to go. And so those 6 individuals will be assigned to go based on their strengths, their area, what they bring. And so there is definitely more to come with like the logistics of it. But as to your question about PL, over the summer, a lot of PL is done, especially related to technology. And so when the team comes back, that individual will, that information that is appropriate would then be put into PL over the summer, as well as Ms. Phillips stated, it will be throughout the year, sustained through Tech Tuesday, professional learning that's done individually at the different schools, information that is available through Schoology that individuals can elect to go and be a part of as well. So it will be professional learning that will be provided as soon as the team returns throughout the entire year. I mean, we still reference back to professional learning that we received last summer at the conference as well.
We don't want to put a damper on this, but when we have a staff member say, oh, I need this, And I'm like, well, why aren't you getting that? You know, it's kind of hard to justify $17,000 for a trip, so, I mean.
I
And
mean,
these
if
dollars
I
are-
could ask, I don't understand where I'm asking about funds spent outside of the classroom, and these are funds that are gonna impact educators and our ability to stay current, why this is having 100% more scrutiny than the latter. I'm just gonna make that point.
Well, because at the end of the day, we're supposed to be scrutinizing all dollars and cents.
Well,
here.
I guess the other ones didn't matter.
Well, no, the
I'm not saying
There-
that.
it's
I
not
didn't say
equal
that.
weight
I
here.
didn't say that.
I'm-
We
I'm-
had-
That
we had-
was,
you-
Ms.
We had our
Ruddy,
voice.
okay,
You had
just-
your
I
voice.
have the floor. Ms. Ruddy, what I made clear to you is that your point has been made. We understand, you've brought it forward. The board has heard it, the public has heard it. We know exactly where you stand on that, and there really
And
wasn't
I
more
was
to add.
asking for the same accountability we're asking for these group of folks. I wanted to know, so we
Wait a minute.
can
Why can't we
understand.
ask this question about that?
You can.
We
I'm-
did.
I'm absolutely saying,
Well,
and
then-
I am supporting it. I did not ask or deny you guys. I didn't interrupt. I didn't say, hey, you know that our role is to trust the superintendent and these folks to do their job. Absolutely. I'm just sharing here that I'm seeing a clear
Okay,
difference.
please save that
All
for your
I'm trying
public,
to
for your,
do-
for comment at the end then, Ms. Ruddy, okay? We need to keep moving this meeting forward. So, is there,
For the public, these dollars are coming out of our digital classroom dollars. They are not coming out of our general fund dollars.
Thank you for that.
all right, are there any other questions?
Thank you.
On 802. 0.02, okay. No, so thank you for
Thank you.
your presentation. And we will move on to academic services. And we have ELA plan by Ms. York and Ms. Vasquez and Ms. Sanfilippo.
And Ms. York is appearing virtually.
Okay. Welcome all.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, board. I apologize for being virtual. I'm home with a broken leg, so.
Oh, goodness.
I have asked Marlene Vasquez and Joyce and Filippo to review our ELL plan. The state requires us to revamp and bring current to all state statute and board rule every 3 years. So Ms. Vasquez and Ms. Sanfilippo, would mind reviewing the plan?
Yes, good afternoon. Thank you for having us here. My name is Marlene, and I am supporting the ESOL program and the Title III grant, mostly in the form of compliance and ensuring that our schools are staying up to date with compliance requirements within that grant. So I'd like to start by giving you a snapshot of what our ESOL population looks like in our schools at this time. During Survey 3 reporting, we have 691 active English language learners, and you'll hear Joy and I speak of those students as ELLs, so the acronym would be English Language Learners. Out of those 691 students, we have approximately 582 of those are non-English speakers or limited English speakers. Many of those students, God bless you, many of those students are students who have been in the United States schools for 3 years or less. In addition to the active English language learners, we do have 227 former ELLs that we are supporting. And those students are students who have been exited from the ESOL program, and they're being monitored for academic success.
Good afternoon. I'm Joy Sanfilippo, and I work on the instructional side. To add to what Marlene said in our snapshot, right now we have 24 languages that are represented in our school system. Of those 24, we do have top 4, which are Spanish at about 40%. Our Russian-speaking students are about 21, and then we also have our Portuguese and Ukrainian behind that. As we move forward, we're going to go ahead and jump into the plan, where Marlene is going to start with the identification and placement.
I'm probably going to peek down at my notes so that I ensure I stay on topic and that I'm concise. I'd like to talk about how we identify and place our ELLs once at registration.
So the process begins during enrollment, and this year we, as you know, our new student enrollment is done online. And within that packet that the parent finds when they register is a document called the Home Language Survey. And that's a document that is required across all districts in Florida. Each district has the choice to include certain questions, but there are 3 that are mandatory, and those 3 questions are ask about a student's language at home and specifically about that student's first language. If a parent marks yes on any of those questions, whether it be 1 or all 3, the process begins. And what happens at the school level is our ESOL contacts are then tasked with assessing those students in English language proficiency. In our district, we use the IPT. It is a series of tests that we purchase, and in grades kindergarten through 2nd, statute requires that we assess in the area of oral language. So we are testing their proficiency in English and speaking and in listening. In grades 3 and above, 3 through 12, we at times would need to administer the IRW, and that is an assessment that tests proficiency in English in the areas of reading and writing. Depending on how the student performs, that is what determines eligibility into the ESOL program. And ESOL would be an acronym that is English for Students of Other Languages. If the student is not proficient in the domains that they're tested in, then they qualify for ESOL services and supports. Once the assessment, the scores are determined, as I said, the students would either qualify or become ineligible for ESOL services. The plan also describes a process that we have through an ELL committee. Most often, our students are qualified and deemed eligible through the test that I just described, but there are opportunities to become eligible for the ESOL program through an ELL committee. And what that usually entails is the stakeholders involved in that student's education. It would be a classroom teacher is required to be part of the committee, the school-based ESOL contact, a guidance counselor. Certainly the parent has to be a part of that committee. And what that team does is they get together and they look at the proficiency scores, but they also look at other important factors that could lead the school team to decide to make a student eligible, even if in some areas they were proficient. It could be prior academic history, a parent's interview with a parent that could possibly describe some interrupted schooling. There are different factors that can be looked at to determine eligibility. In section 3 of our plan, we explain our process. It's called the programmatic assessment. And what that is a process, it's a document that we use to really protect us in 2 ways. It ensures that we are placing our students appropriately and are using sound decisions when doing so. It really helps us avoid placing a student grade levels behind their age appropriateness simply for the fact that they are not proficient in English. It also ensures that we, in the upper levels in high school, are placing students in advanced courses if foreign transcripts deem that student is capable and has taken coursework previously that would make them eligible to take advanced coursework. Once all of that is done, we develop our school-based folks, and Joy and I develop an ELL student plan, not to be confused with our district plan. But our ELL student plan is very similar to an IEP. The plan from a compliance perspective, which is what I'm going to speak about, includes important dates that really drive funding, and I'll just give a few examples. One of the dates would be, our acronym for that is DUCE, and that means the date that a student entered a United States school. And funding is all derived from that first time in United States school. Other dates would be the date that a student classified and became eligible for services. In addition, there's these codes in that ELL plan that during survey reporting ensure that our district receives the weighted FTE funding that our ESOL students are entitled to. I'm going to take a peek to, one last point for that I'd like to highlight. The plan in section 11 also goes on to describe the process called extension of services. And we outline our process for handling students who have been in an ESOL program for
beyond the third year, so in year 4 and beyond, we are required to have a laid out plan to ensure that either A, we continue to offer ESOL services and supports to those students through an extension, or we look at their current levels and we can deem them as appropriate for exiting the ESOL program. So that section talks further about all of the intricacies involved in that. I believe that's my part. So Joy will now pick up on the program requirements, what happens once they're ESOL, and how students are instructed. Thank you.
Okay, so I'm going to pick up in section 4, and that is the comprehensive program requirements and student instruction. So I'll begin with 3 sections from there, and that is the instructional model. So you think about, okay, now our students are in the ESOL program. So if they are in the secondary setting, which that's our 6th through 12th grade, they can enter into our sheltered English class. It's usually an intensive reading class. This class is going to give students a deep dive into the listening, the speaking, the reading, and writing of the English language. It's really for our newcomers that come here, and they are more along the non-English speaking side. Also are very limited English speakers. The rest of our instructional model falls into what we would call our mainstream inclusion. So that would be all of K to 5, and then the 6 to 12 into their content area classes, their elective courses. And that is full English immersion, just like sheltered English is, but this is where they are with all of their regular English-speaking peers. Moving further into the ESOL instructional strategy section, the goal here is to ensure that the students are receiving strategies to attain language, but also to comprehend the content material. An example of a typical lesson can include anchor charts. This is where it would help to sort, clarify information. These are services that and strategies that really are good for all of our students, but benefit especially our students in the ESOL program. Differentiated question prompts are going to help the student to understand at their level of language, but it's also going to help them to be able to engage in the learning, because then they will be offering what they know. Because oftentimes they know more than we realize if the only barrier is the language. And we have many other instructional strategies that we can go on and on, but those are a couple of them. Further, we move into our student progression. So this is where we really need to see the why behind a possible need for retention in the same grade. So with an English language learner, any grade, there needs to be an evidence of L instruction. So really it's what it is a form. And the ESOL contact, that's the person who is at each school and they oversee the ESOL program as well as work with our students. Them, as well as classroom teachers for that subject area, would fill out this form, and then that would be brought to an ELL committee meeting that Marlene was explaining earlier. So we're going to have data, we're going to have observation, we're going to have parent input, teacher input, support staff input about this child before a decision is made. Which leads us to our good cause for 3rd grade mandatory retention with our state assessment for reading. When we have a student in the ESOL program who has been in a United States school for less than 2 years, and they do not pass the 3rd grade reading assessment, what happens if we deem that it is for English language proficiency reasons that they did not pass the test, then we have an ELL committee meeting. Through that decision, we then would bring it to our superintendent, and she would go ahead and finalize the decision, should the student move on to 4th grade or should the student be retained. And that's what the good cause statement, and that's how it works here. That is the end of section 4. We'll move into section 5 where we talk about statewide assessments. The goal here is for students to be able to appropriately take these assessments. In other words, all of our ESOL students take all state assessments in English, and due to that, they do have some accommodations. The accommodations are statewide accommodations. We don't choose them. They are listed in the plan to note that we do follow them. They are for our students in the ESOL program. So in this case, think of the 691. but they are also for our monitored students that have exited the ESOL program. So the additional 277 this year will be able to receive those accommodations. That leads us into section 6, which is the English language proficiency assessment that is given yearly. The goal is to review the data and to use it for planning, and then to determine if a student is exited out of the ESOL program. It's one of the criteria. This is done through the WIDA. It's called Access for ALS, and it measures the 4 language domains, the listening, speaking, reading, and writing. The section also states that there needs to be mandatory training for this assessment yearly, so that is properly given. And this is provided by our district assessment coordinator, and the training is for our school-based test administrators. Finally, moving into section 7, that is the monitoring procedure. So we were just talking about our ESOL students who are exited. For 2 years after being exited, they are monitored 4 times. Basically, the teacher fills out a form because they have stated that they are observing their students. They're seeing if this student is on grade level, below grade level, and everything, the way they're thinking about it is, oh, this student is behind because they are not turning in work. It's not about that. It's looking at it from an English language proficiency standpoint. Because remember, English language proficiency is not mastery. So if they are proficient in the language, they still might need a little bit of leeway and understanding that, are they falling behind because of English language, or is it something else? The last section to review for us is the personnel training. This falls into 3 categories. The first one are the personnel requirements. This is under the HR department. The HR department is responsible for monitoring the instructional staff throughout the entire county to make sure that they have the required hours for the ESOL certifications and the ESOL endorsement. Next is supplemental professional learning. So Marlene offers compliance training for anyone in the county who is submerged in the compliance side of the ESOL program, while I provide training for staff who are submerged in the instructional side of the ESOL program. We also bring in outside trainers. For example, we have Solution Tree and TESOL trainers giving our teachers professional learning this summer. The last section is the ESOL para support. So the state rule is linked inside the plan, and it states that when a school has 15 or more students with the same native language, that a specific teacher or aide, in our case we have ESOL paraprofessionals, is hired to assist in the instructional support for the students. They must be fluent in both English and their native language in listening, speaking, reading, and writing. Their job roles are listed in the ELL plan that we have put together for our county. And that is the snapshot of the main points of our plan.
Do we get federal dollars for this, or state, or how does that work?
I think Tammy wanted to answer these parts, and she has
Yes,
disappeared.
Yes, we do receive federal dollars for our ESOL program.
Basically, just about everything.
Do you get to, like, any data of where families come from? I'm just curious.
Yes, we can certainly provide that in depth, or I can even pull up my computer. But we have such an array, which I find interesting. We have students coming in. Just this week, I monitored the pending students, the students that are enrolling, and we have it from the gamut of Colombia to the Philippines. We've had, those really have been, recently it's been the Philippines. When I say influx, about 6 or 7 kids, which was unusual for past. But they come from all over. I can certainly provide you more concrete examples.
When you say 15 students in a school, you're given one ESOL teacher. That's not per class, so that they could be on multiple levels. They have to bounce all over between those 15 students. Yes, ma'am. Mm-hmm. That's a challenge.
ESOL para.
Para.
Right.
I'm sorry.
Right.
Thank
It
you.
could be a teacher, though.
I had noticed on previous school board meetings where we had to vote on some personnel items, and they involved ESOL credits where teachers were behind on them. So
Yes.
some had a significant number of credits that they were behind, and it didn't change from 1 month to the next. So I'm wondering, what are some reasons? Why would they be behind? Or what are you guys able to get out to them to provide them? Or is it a compliance thing on their own, like it's a course they're supposed to be completing and they haven't done so?
Would you like to answer, Joy, or?
There's two types of certification. As an example, there is, if you are a certified ESOL teacher and you are not endorsed, then and correct me with this, the 60 hours must be every 5 years.
She's back.
There's Tammy.
But
Keep
I
going,
apologize.
you're
I
on.
got kicked out.
Okay. Keep going, you're on the right track.
So when we're talking about the 60 hours every 5 years, we have several different types of professional learning within our county. But when it comes to the initial certification
Right.
or endorsement, that is something that they are responsible for. However, we have in the past had funds available to reimburse, but I don't believe, do we still have?
We still only reimburse.
Okay, I know our funds, we did not, it did maybe move over into another department, I think.
May I add something?
Yes, please.
Thank you. So the Human Resources Department is the department that initially notifies teachers when they're out of field. And I can't speak to all the intricacies on how they do that notification, but I am aware that there is an official letter that's signed by them and the principal. So our teachers are aware of the requirements. And then I think I would say what you said, that they are professionally responsible to complete that coursework within the allotted time that is really laid out in that letter. I've seen the example letter. I wish I could answer why sometimes that does not happen. I think in the past years, the district has thought, could it be a financial reason? Is it difficult for them to pay for the course or to add that to the certificate? And I believe all of the reimbursement had, really helped that along. I think that's the best I can answer as far as, I don't know why sometimes teachers, maybe they think it's going to go away and we won't notice, but I know that HR certainly keeps up and sends that letter out repeatedly.
And so they're given students, even if they're out of compliance
ma'am.
with their credits, or not in the initial? Why would people be on that initial, like, for example, you don't have to have an ESOL certification unless
Right.
you're in certain subject
Right.
areas. So they must be in a subject area that requires it and or have students.
Correct.
Okay.
It's triggered when a student is in that
Yeah.
class, that they need to get the hours.
Yes.
And I can certainly add to that, Ms. Ruddy. Our ESOL numbers have gone up significantly in the last 3 years. And what we have found is we have to spread the students out, because if not, we're not really providing inclusion in classrooms. When you're getting 10 and 12 ELL students in one classroom, it would be the same as if we're putting that many ESE students. At some point, there's a tipping point where you're not able to learn English as well from their English fluent peers, because there are so many students in one classroom. And our public universities now, especially in the state of Florida, with the new graduates coming out with ESOL endorsement embedded in their coursework. And those graduates are usually people that are transferring in from out of state, or they are teachers like me that I will say that are, longevity-wise, been around a long time. I started teaching when the meta-consent decree first came in. And there's still a few holdouts that keep thinking, if I just ignore it, it will go away. But it really has been, this is 35 or 36 for me, and it hasn't gone away yet. So I think that we have people that, for whatever reason, haven't gotten it. But the majority of our teachers are working for it.
So if they don't have these credits then, and they have these students then, are you then, Joy, supporting them to provide these strategies? Because I'm assuming they don't know these strategies until they've taken those credits. At least for some, there were a couple hundred off of the credits. So I'm
Right.
assuming that means they don't have
Classes,
any.
yeah.
Right. So do you try to supplement that until they get their credits?
Well, as an example, several months ago, I was at Buddy Taylor, and we had which Buddy Taylor worked it into their plan to actually give stipends to their teachers, and we did an after-school training, and it was the foundational principles for academic language for ESOL students in this ESOL program.
Excellent. Okay, wonderful. Thank you.
And then Joy has also been working with the literacy coaches and the math coaches to help support embedding of those strategies in the ongoing PLCs that are happening at the school on a regular basis.
Okay, are there any other questions? All
Thank
right.
you, ladies.
Thank you all for your
Thank you for your
presentation.
Thank you for your information.
Thank you very much.
Okay, so we'll move on to 9.02, and this is travel consent. And Mr. Reeves,
Yes,
there he is.
Yes, sir. Good afternoon. Good afternoon, Board, Superintendent Moore. We have 3 travel requests before you today. One for Flagler Coast High School, one for Indian Trails, and one for Matanzas High School. One is involving FPC as their SGA as a leadership retreat or a leadership trip coming up. 8th grade for Indian Trails has their 8th grade promotion celebration. And for Matanzas High School, it is a softball tournament. Any questions?
Any questions, Board? No? Okay, thank you, Mr. Reeves. Appreciate
Thank
that.
you for that.
Okay, so we will move on to 10.02, Survey 6.1. Mr. Bush.
Good afternoon, Board, Chair Furry, and Superintendent. I bring before you Survey 6.1. The survey recommendations are for the next 5 years for new construction, remodeling, renovations, upgrading of equipment and systems. The survey allows for use of state funds on those projects, on them type of projects. State funds being PICO and CONDS funds. I know that there's been questions about the survey, and what the best way I can explain it is we don't receive PICO funds currently, but in the event something awesome happens and they say, here's funds, and Patty calls me and says we have this amount of money. If it was not on the survey, then we would not be able to use those funds towards a project that maybe we are wanting to do. So this just is, it's not that some of the projects are in our 5-year plan that we're looking at, some of them are not, but it's just to capture that in the event that we have those funds and we're able to use those dollars towards that.
Okay.
Any questions?
No? No questions? It doesn't look like. Thank you, Mr. Bush.
Thank you. Yeah, I was asked to stay up.
Okay, you're going to stay for the proportionate share?
Yes, Ms. Lisa
Okay,
asked
so we
if I
got
could stay here for her.
10.4, 10.04, Belterra Estates, Mr. Freeman.
All right, good afternoon, Board, Chair Furry, Superintendent Moore. Today I'd like to introduce Miss Lisa Davina. She is our school planner. She comes with a wealth of knowledge after spending over 3 years down in Volusia County. So she was able to come in and hit the ground running and has just been a great asset to the district and to the operations team. So I'm going to let Lisa talk to you about Belterra Estates.
Very good.
Good afternoon, Chair Furry, board members, and Superintendent Moore. I bring to you the proportionate share mitigation agreement for Belterra Estates. It's a 40-acre residential project. It has 275 single-family dwelling units in its project, and it is south of the airport where it is located. And it is expected to generate 60 student stations, 24 for Bunnell Elementary, 14 for Buddy Taylor, and 22 for Flagler Coast. As you know, we do not have capacity in our middle schools and in our high schools, so Belterra Estates would need to mitigate for 36 student stations, and that is equal to about $1.3 million. It is, the payment would be distributed in 4 tranches. The first 3 tranches would be 30% each payments at $392,400, and then the last 10% will be paid directly as impact fees in the course of the permitting business. And if you have any questions.
And so this is the typical language that had been in the interlocal agreement. So I'm curious, from as coming new to this district, right, we've had an ongoing issue with the developer not making timely payments. And so do you feel that the 6% interest rate that is being included or tacked on is standard, what you've seen in your experience?
In my experience in Volusia, we have not had that experience because it was just last year that the new developments started hitting our level of service caps. So it was only last year that we have started mitigation agreements.
Mm-hmm.
But I believe this 6% per diem was negotiated with the developer.
Thank you.
I'm just trying to figure out where this is, like Z section, K, going that?
The maps on here are always awful. They're so hard
It's,
to.
That's the map right there. Is that not a good map?
Oh, that's better than the one I have on the
black
actual
and white
mitigation
one.
one.
It's yes, it's on the.
It's like, looks like it's outer space.
The nearest intersection is Belterre Boulevard and Citation.
That's a good map. Okay, I see. State Street.
Oh yeah, the K's.
Oh, okay, that's at the bottom of Belterre.
Going into US
We're-
1.
Oh, yeah, we're.
That's right.
Okay, got it.
There's multiple parcels in that,
Mhm.
right?
Very good. Any other questions on this agenda item?
Welcome.
Yeah,
you.
welcome.
I am happy
So
to
many
be
new
here.
faces that we're seeing. Thank you all for
Thank
that
you.
information.
Thank you, ma'am.
Okay. Okay, so now it moves us on to human resources. Approval of personnel items, and we have Mr. Bob Ouellette.
Chair Furry, Board, Superintendent Moore. As always, at this point at the workshop, the personnel document is always a work in progress. So we'll be adding additional personnel in the additional categories. Have any questions?
Yeah, so I get, obviously, there's a ratio when you add new teachers. I see that there's a custodial services person added new. How do you determine when there needs to be a new individual, an addition to the staff?
Throughout the course of the year, we have a staffing committee which is composed of senior staff, Angela and Patty and myself and Ryan and the coordinator for position control, and they're submitted by the school or by department directors based on need, and then the discussion is committee whether or not they fit into the formula as far as is there a need for the position, and if so, is it something that at this time we need to fill, or can they address it in other ways?
Because, you know, we have a certain amount of square feet that we haven't changed. So I would have imagined that the custodial services would have been about the same, unless there had been additional responsibilities added to
The
those people.
new that was added is for Matanzas High School, the addition.
Ah, got you.
So we do use a.
And the courthouse.
And the courthouse, yes.
Okay, thank
So we do use a formula, as you stated, Ms. Ruddy,
Okay.
in order to determine that. So the new specifically here is for the addition of Matanzas High School and for the historical courthouse.
Appreciate that, thank you.
Okay, so any other questions for Mr. Ouellette?
No.
All right, thank you,
Thank
sir. Okay, so that looks like it concludes our business for today. So that leads us to public comment. Do we have anybody signed up for public comment today?
No, sir.
No? Okay. So we will close public comment, and we will move on to board member requests. Do we have any board member requests?
Yes, or do you want me to start?
Yeah, you can start.
All right.
Yes, please go ahead.
Okay, so just a couple things. brainstorming, trying to be creative, but, so transportation, I would like to see, is there a way that we can have a transportation campaign? Okay, so imagine, you know, we need buses, or not buses, we need drivers. We need drivers. Buses would be great too. But, so we have 71 full-time drivers. It'd be great to have 84, you know, we're down about 3, 2 subs, 4 vans for drivers. So if we could, I don't know, like, I'm thinking like campaigning, more like advertising, just getting the word out more. I'm thinking, you know, even if like someone's wearing t-shirts, oh, now hiring. I know we have the bus out there, like parked, but trying to just see, is there a way that we can figure out to have a big campaign of transportation, growing it, getting the word out more. You know, I know it's really needed, so that's the one request. Communication with transportation. So, let me just look at my notes. So, I read over the standard operation procedure, and 15 minutes is the time frame. So it looks like we're missing like the person to communicate to the parents. So is there a way maybe we can work together? Could we have some type of like on-call person or something? You know, and again, I'm just throwing this out there
Can
as
you
like.
clarify what you mean by communicate to the parents?
So when a bus is running late, or they have to pick up extra kids because. You know,
and are you saying that they should
so
send an email to those parents?
So the bus drivers are driving. They're not the ones that are going to text the parents. Right? They're not. That's not the safety protocol. They're going to message to transportation team,
The dispatcher,
hey, we're
yeah.
running late for such and such, you know. But when they do that, it's not getting sent to the parents, and it's because no one's able to answer that call because they're riding buses, and you know, because the other kids need to be picked up. So can we come up with like a plan to, some type of plan where so you're on call?
Mr. Freeman,
Yeah.
If you want.
We do have a procedure that we have just recently implemented. We have an SOP for a communication plan.
Yeah.
Where when buses are running late or when a route is changed, when there's a new driver, we're able to communicate directly with parents through our routing software, where we know all the students that should be on the bus, and we can send, okay, this bus,
So I know you do, February 25th, it was new. I read it. The problem is, it was updated February 25th. I don't know if that process is getting done because the parents.
I will tell you what, my kids ride the bus, and if it's late, if it's so a different driver, I do receive that, and so it is a new process.
Okay.
And so we would say to our families, if you're not receiving the communication, then communicate with us so that we know that it is that it's not happening consistently. But we just implemented this. And I know I receive the messages, but if families aren't receiving those messages, we ask them to just communicate directly with us. You know, send an email to myself, moorel@flaglerschools.com, or to Mr. Walker, so that we can look into those specific that specifically, because maybe it's something on the parent side with, do they have the correct settings and all of those
But someone
things
has
set
to
up.
physically be in the room to communicate to the parents. So that's what I'm getting at. Like,
No,
'cause
it
I know
needs to go into the
The
software
routers do it.
system.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, that originally, so there's a breakdown, right? If individuals, the leaders, are having to drive the buses, right? So that means we are really short and
Yeah.
nobody's, then there is going to be a delay in that
So
communication.
that's what I'm wondering. So when that happens, because it's going to happen, right? Is there something we can kind of come up with as plan B? Like,
Well, shouldn't they send the message before they get in the bus and drive it?
Yes.
We still have the routers or a dispatch person in the routing office. We have to have somebody that is
Yes.
dispatching. So we have at least one, most of the time, there's 2 people in the routing office.
All right.
That should be able to do that. I did also wanted to address some of the advertising that we're doing, you know, on the back of
okay.
every bus. We have a license tag that we have put on there about,
Yeah.
you know, anybody that would like to drive, they could do that. You've seen our bus out front. We are working with HR with doing an operational job fair coming up in
July.
Okay.
And I thought we were also looking at potentially in April if we needed it.
Yeah.
But
Okay.
I know we're going to have one later on in the summer for the next year.
And I would say, Chair, and we can problem solve all of these, but do we want to gather the requests and you guys give us information that you want us to
So
bring
I just
back?
want to remind everybody what this time period is for. This is a time to make requests individually of agenda items that we are going to bring back. We're getting to a lot of procedural discussion here, and the question is do we need to bring anything back as an agenda item for policy-related items?
So I guess maybe upcoming board member discussion topics, just on the back end of having a plan and now knowing, like, I know that February.
A presentation of, you would like to hear?
Yeah, and I think for parents to hear too,
Yeah.
just because now, communication coming out and in.
Because then we can have, if we make it a future agenda item, then we can have a little bit more robust discussion around here and give some direction from our, where we stand.
Okay.
Is there anything else? So
No.
it's just the transportation and
Yep,
communication?
transportation campaign and
Okay.
communication.
Thank you, Ms.
Yep, and then,
Ramirez.
yep, and then I just want to throw out the public school campaign for the Florida School Board Association that we talked about earlier. So if our communications team wants to look into that, they already have the bundle ready, so they can promote that to parents and families and communities.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And Ms. Ruddy, any board member requests? Anybody else?
Yeah, I would like to put on a future agenda item for us to discuss possibly creating a zoning proposal around tobacco-free zones around our schools for future builds, as well as from the last meeting, the gifted screener, universal, transparency around the school choice, especially when it comes to the lottery system. And I'd like to add the cooperative health insurance benefit options that we're exploring. I would like to have an update on what was the outcome and present that to the board and the public.
Anybody else? Okay, so that will move us, I guess the upcoming board discussion topics will be updated in the future, and that leads us to closing comments. So we will start down at the end. Ms. Ramirez.
Well, great activities going on tonight at Belterre is the science night. So if any parents or board members are free, and Matanzas has some things going on, but yep, lots going on, busy day, and have a good night.
I was really excited to be able to join the Mardi Gras Gala and support the Ed Foundation Take Stock in Children. That was a wonderful event. We appreciate everybody who put that together, as well as the Marine Science Night at Wadsworth. That was wonderful. And Rimfire Future Problem Solvers held a career fair to also get their peers excited about learning about careers and staying motivated. I have noticed that on a lot of these events, I'm seeing educators who've got like 15, 20 years experience. It used to be in the day that you kind of had to, when you're a first year, second year, third year teacher, that you were in charge of these after school programs, right? You kind of pay your dues a little bit. I know that there is a requirement, or at least a suggestion in the contract, where they attend a minimum of 2 after-school events, but remember that's the minimum, and we want to be a premier organization, and so I encourage you to do more than the minimum. I would like to see some newer folks out there manning those after-school activities. That would be really wonderful. In regard to my issue with radio station ads, it isn't about the radio station ads, it's about the money. And so when I know that I struggled as a teacher to pay my bills, and that was before historically high, well, besides what was it, 1980-something, inflation, I can't imagine what is happening now in those households. And so I know that as a school board member, yes, my one vote to say no on an individual item that has already been paid isn't going to do anything, but it is to make a stance for us to think harder about outsourcing money for activities that aren't going to directly impact students and teachers, because that's the time we're in right now. If we have those extras, it would be great. What I would appreciate from my fellow school board members is that if I am asking these questions, I am certainly asking it as a strategy to make sure that that information is getting out to the constituents, because that's who I'm accountable to. And that when I'm asking about it, it's to say, I want to report on the impact of that dollar spent. That is why I keep asking it, because that has not been fulfilled or a plan communicated that we will receive that. So I don't feel we should be rubber stamping our expenditures, because if that's the only case for a school board member, then I would move right now to say, let's save everybody $200,000 and get rid of the school board. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We'll update after this week on Friday with our legislative folks on our meetings that we'll have next week with legislative days. Provide that information out to you. I know Mr. Bob will be sending out information on the scheduling, so we'll have that more comprehensive by the end of this week, so everyone kind of has an idea of what we're doing, and I'll be communicating that through the superintendent's office. And then we'll make sure that our fellow board members have that information so we can have a successful legislative days next week with our delegate. As we move forward in this contention that we've had, I think we're tackling an issue. You know, we need to be tackling issues that are here, and I think that's what we're trying to do. And if we're looking at dollars and cents that we're talking about, you have to look at all dollars and cents. And supporting our teachers and staff is something that most all of us in this room is what we're here to do in the first place. You know, we talk about communication, and I realize I just want to piggyback off what Ms. Ruddy was saying. We piggyback off of things that we want to communicate to our families, and we do need to look at how we can save money as we're going through the process into our next not legislative, but our budgeting cycle. That's when we're going to continue to have to do that, where it's going to make an impact on the next budgeting cycle and how our money is spent. And that's what we're going to have to do. We're dealt with a budget right now that was outside of our control before we got here, the three of us to my right. So it's important for us to look and see as we continue to have to tighten our belts and what that's going to look like to get down to, we may not be able to have the frills that we want. And we all understand that, or at least we should be. We should see that because I'm having to do it in my household, everybody else has to do it at their household. And we're going to do it in this house as well. But still making sure that we have and we can meet our obligation of having a premier education where we want students to come to and not leave and go to other locations. And we're going to have to work together as a team to be able to do that. And hopefully we will not work against one another to make sure that we get those things done for our community and our students. And I think that's priority one. I'm done.
Yeah, I said it at the last meeting, and I'll just say it again. I think we're all on the same page. We want to be fiscally responsible and support our teachers and staff the best we can. So we do have to look at everything, and we'll look at that all together. And I know we're all tired. I just want to say thank you to all of our staff. I know it's been a long day, so thank you for all your hard work.
Yes, it has been a long day. Thank you all for a very productive day, I might add. I feel all the way through our executive session and our special meeting this morning. And I know this is a lot of extra time that the board and staff is contributing to, and I just appreciate everybody's time to get this overhaul of our policies done. And when it comes to some of the topics that we talked about fiscal responsibility and budgets. And as Ms. Chong said, I think we're all on board on that. And I mean, when I first was elected, I discovered that, you know, a program called Let's Talk that we were spending like almost $50,000 on, and it was, we just weren't using it, and we got rid of it. I'm all for getting rid of things that we don't need to spend money on. You know, while we're talking on agenda items, it's my goal to make sure everybody's point is heard, right? And then once the point has been made, if there's nothing more to add to it, we got to move on with our meeting. This meeting has to keep moving forward. But I do encourage members to. There's a reason why we have the closing comments, is because this is our opportunity to take all the things that we've noted, whether before we arrived here today or during this process, and communicate that to the public, communicate that to your other board members, and without any restriction other than the ones that we put on ourselves. So that is a great time to communicate your feelings about agenda items. Not to say that we're not going to have debate in them, but once a point has been made, if there's nothing more to add to that point, we're going to keep moving this forward. Aside from that conversation, it was really a joy to also participate in the Ed Foundation Mardi Gras celebration. Really enjoyed seeing many of the staff here as well and the members of the community, and just grateful for the Ed Foundation and all the work they do to raise the money for these amazing programs like Take Stock in Children. So I will then pass it to you, Superintendent Moore. Is there anything else that you'd like to add to today's meeting?
Have a good night.
All right. This meeting's adjourned.